And the next item is submission on the draft energy efficiency and conservation strategy.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I used to have shares in one of the companies that we're talking about, but I actually just checked last night, and my share broker has moved a number of shares around, and I don't actually hold any in that one anymore.
This is the draft strategy around ECAN. This is not about our electricity.
Oh, is this a different one? Okay, I'll stop.
Yeah. I think he's now skiting, don't you? Yeah. Just, you know, I mean, I'm a former cabinet minister, and actually having shares in a blind trust is actually a very good thing to do, so that you don't actually know what shares you've got in anything. That way there are no conflicts of interest. But thank you for sharing that information, which is entirely irrelevant for this particular debate. Okay, we've got staff here in relation to the draft New Zealand Energy Efficiency and Conservation Strategy submission. So, if there are any questions, Sarah? Oh, right. Okay.
Oh, thank you. When it comes to the public sector, and we've got a suggestion here for the supporting actions table, where we change it to consider how public sector agencies can implement procurement, and adding in the greenhouse gas emissions. So that's page 100, 99-100 in our submission. I'd just like to, in a similar vein to how we thought that support wasn't very strong, rather than getting the government to consider how it could do things, I think maybe suggesting that they should implement them as an action rather than considering them as an action. So taking out the consider how public sector agencies can implement, and actually just say implement procurement policies that take into account these things.
So are you suggesting that that should be saying require public sector agencies to implement
policies, procurement policies, yeah. I think that would be stronger rather than just getting agencies to consider it, if people think that's a good idea. It's our procurement policies. Yeah. And the government's funds.
Well, the life cycle costs will not recognise. So I think it's
yeah.
Okay.
I think I was next, wasn't I?
Yeah, Pauline's next. Oh. And can I have a show of hands who else wants to ask questions? So
So I've got a couple of questions on page. I think it's page 110. They talk about the transport accounts for around 36% of energy use and 17% of New Zealand's gross emissions. I thought it was a lot higher than that. I thought transport was 50%. That's in the government's submission, draft submission. But I'm just querying that statistic anyway. They also, they talk about heat process changes, and that's also on page 110, and I'm wondering if we could encourage them to have a shorter time frame to address that. 60% of the process heat is supplied by using fossil fuels, and to actually, what's the time frame, can improve by 4 to 12% between 2010 and 2030. Do you think it's conceivable that we could, that they could actually get that achieved in a shorter time frame?
The strategy that we're dealing with today is only a 5-year strategy, and it's essentially the work plan for the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority. So there is a broader strategy that this sits within, and that's the New Zealand Energy Strategy, which is a longer term one. So that would be the place to change those sorts of timeframes rather than this one. This is a very short.
Unless you could,
it's essentially the work plan.
Yeah.
So
unless you could bring them down into the 5 years.
Yes, which is most unlikely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was my question here.
Yes.
The other thing is, I don't think they've mentioned solar once on page 112 very briefly, we haven't really reinforced solar, and I'm wondering also why we haven't actually mentioned biofuels anywhere. We've looked at electrification and other.
Yes, no, good question. The solar, when you're looking at renewable energy and hitting on the carbon emissions, solar for New Zealand isn't a great target. It's got some other benefits for a number of reasons, but when you're looking at carbon emissions, it's those transport and industrial type emissions. That's the big target. Right. So from ECA's perspective, and I think from some others, solar's not a real target to aim for if you want some big change quickly in New Zealand because of our 82% renewable electricity supply at the moment. But people are doing it for other reasons.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the biofuel?
On the biofuels, the ECA have, if it's not coming through here, have got a program where they're looking to move more from the energy efficiency, still important, but definitely a message on the carbon, looking at reducing carbon. So they are doing a lot of work in Southland on wood biomass and those sorts of things, so innovations. So it is a component of it's not coming through here. That definitely could be an addition to push that.
I'd be happy to see that as an addition, and particularly applicable to businesses. I mean, if we can get a lot of the diesel transport using biofuels, that could have a considerable impact. And just the other feeling I kind of get from their draft is that it's actually based more on economic benefit rather than environmental benefit. I could be wrong, but that's what I'm reading into that.
Yeah, the goal is threefold. One is energy efficiency, the other is productivity in terms of the economy, and then the third one is the low carbon. So it's wanting those three to work together.
Yeah, okay. And the other thing I wondered if, because we want to continue, encourage the government to continue the ECA program, so maybe we should strengthen that. And incentivisation, where's the incentivisation? So someone's got to lead that. Someone's got to, it's all very well to say, yeah, we want this, but where are the incentives? Where are the incentives for people to buy an electric bike and get out of their car? Is there anything we can strengthen there to suggest that there could be more incentivisation for people to adopt this? And that comes from my environmental lens rather than the economic lens, which is, why I asked that other question. So I think that's all I kind of have for now. Oh, and the strengthening, the encouraging the innovation, so the government to actually fund innovation towards energy efficiencies is probably a good one to strengthen. Thank you.
Very good. Phil, then Yanni.
Look, thank you very much for the work you've done on it, because there's a lot of detailed work being done, and it is excellent. And a real strength that I thought was the area on where businesses can contribute and that kind of thing. I did have a few questions all round. I just wondered, Helen, thanks for explaining that. In fact, this is just sort of part of the wider New Zealand energy strategy. And maybe if it just seemed to me that since this is really about contributing to climate change, that in fact we should include some of those wider aspects too, in terms of where this sits. So I'd be interested in your comment on that, and then I've got some other specific questions too.
So the strategy itself does reference back to the New Zealand Energy Strategy. So they've done that quite well in terms of how it nests, and the context is reasonably clear in there. What it probably doesn't do, though, is link it all the way back to the sort of climate change objectives that
which I would have thought was what really is the paramount issue.
Certainly. So we can put a comment in the front, but as I say, they've got that threefold goal.
I see that.
And it isn't just about low carbon. It's as much about the productivity of the economy and the energy efficiency. So
yeah, in all fairness, that was my point too. But I don't think it is enough about climate change. Yep. And maybe that's something that you're getting at, Phil, to strengthen that side of the
certainly we can do that.
Now, and look, thank you. And so look, the parts on transport are really so important. I see you've broken them up a bit, but I just think and perhaps Nick might like to comment on this, actually making it clear that part of the way forward in terms of the modes of transport change, which you refer to, in fact, is really working at alternative modes, including cycleways and walking, and we really spell that out. I just felt if some emphasis on that, and also acknowledging that in fact Christchurch has got a big investment in cycleways, and government have supported that. The other part too, though, is because and I think like maybe some clarity about the quantity of the emissions from transport, because we weren't quite clear on that. You might have had it there, and we asked about that, because my understanding it's at least a third of our carbon emissions really are. No? Is it what? Can we get that figure?
I think that's it may be confusing in that often it's the percentages are expressed ignoring agricultural emissions.
Oh, absolutely.
So once you put agricultural emissions in there, it looks a lot smaller.
Right. Well, maybe and that's some I appreciate
agricultural emissions of methane.
Yeah.
That's right. No, I don't think transport's 50%, because there's all the stationary energy in there as well, you see.
Well, maybe some of those figures could be included if you, and you'll have them.
We can check those. They'll be referenced.
That would be great. And look, I am pleased that you referred to the fact, look, we're doing a lot in the electric car area, but in fact that isn't a nirvana, that there'll still be too many cars will still lead, and commuting will lead to urban sprawl, and I commend you for being brave on that. It doesn't mean we don't do the new technology. The part, in fact we are. The part though that I wondered about too is in reference to rail, is that in fact there's a real gap there that you'll be aware of, Nick, will be that in fact Kiwi Rail is really quite separate from the Regional Land Transport Plan, for example. It's not included because it's a commercial sort of arm of government, and just how in fact rail, and particularly in the freight area, can be supported, I guess, to lessen the carbon emissions. So they were some of the sort of areas I had. Just specifically too, I just wanted to make sure, and you can perhaps clarify this for us, on page 99, there's to support councils to adopt voluntary targeted rate schemes where possible. I'm just wondering if you could perhaps put in language for us as to how that would work.
So the Environment Canterbury have a voluntary targeted rates scheme set up in some centres, not in Christchurch, where people can essentially take a loan and pay it back through their rates for getting rid of open fires, for insulation of their homes, that sort of thing. So it's not rolled out right the way through the country, but it is in some towns and cities. Yeah. Particularly, and for Environment Canterbury, it's particularly around air pollution benefits as well as the warm, healthy home.
Christchurch has previously had that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I just kind of felt like I appreciate all the work you've done on the submission, but I felt it was quite soft, and we should be a lot more direct in terms of things that government could do. I mean, I think Christchurch has got a really important story to share with the rest of New Zealand and with government over the lost opportunity following the earthquake. So I'm surprised that there's not more mention of district plan and regulatory processes to actually get better energy efficiency through homes. It tends to refer to existing programs as being successful, but my take would be that we've actually lost a lot because we weren't able to put those regulatory things into our district plan around new builds, and even the repairs and the whole repair program through EQC or through the insurance companies seem to lose the opportunity to make things energy efficient. So I just wondered if you'd had any consideration of that, like maybe just talking about taking opportunities post disasters to actually improve the energy efficiency of a city or of a community through land use planning and district planning, which we don't seem to have done at all.
It's not something that was considered as part of this submission, but we could certainly go and have a look at that. So it would be around legislative and regulatory reform in terms of both Resource Management Act as a mechanism, but also the Building Act and the standards in the Building Code as a mechanism. So and then you would get multiple benefits in terms of both the energy efficiency and reduced emissions, but also better quality housing.
And also, I think we should think also wider than energy efficiency. If you think of things like water conservation, for example, like the idea that people have grey water systems as a requirement. I mean,
This is ECA's.
We could, but this is
Yeah.
an energy efficiency strategy.
Yeah.
yes, but you know, if you think of through the whole debate about home heating, the whole thing about, you know, going from solid fuel burners to electricity, it's quite interesting around that health argument around people being able to afford to actually be warm versus, you know, doing what's better for the environment. So I just think, you know, I just thought that
that is energy. So,
Yeah.
I mean, yes,
So-
I mean, look, everyone understands that the conservation issues go far further than energy, but this is the energy conservation
no, I understand that,
strategy.
but it shouldn't be done at the expense of the health of people, in my view. And you need some caution around that. But also just the other thing I thought that,
Sorry, I don't know what you mean by that. It shouldn't, energy efficiency should not be done to the expense of people's health.
yeah.
So what are you saying?
So basically, you know, like going to cleaner technologies, if it's more expensive, has an impact on people's ability to be able to afford to access energy, then we should actually be mindful of the social impact of that. But I think the other thing for me was just the whole issue of land use and intensification or use of brownfields versus greenfields. I know at the start we kind of talk about that, but there seems to be this contradiction that we just open up more land for housing. So I wasn't quite sure if you'd thought much about.
I think land use planning is worth some commentary, because if you're not locating around hubs, then you're forcing people into cars, you're forcing people into you know, travelling at a distance. You know, I mean, I remember one of the subdivisions that opened over in the east, you couldn't even walk to the local dairy. You know, it's just there was just nothing. Yeah, but land use planning, you know, sort of prioritising brownfields as opposed to greenfields is absolutely appropriate because of the link. But also, so are the standards that apply to the builds themselves. And it is true that some of the standards we wanted to include in our district plan were not accepted by the independent hearings panel, and that position was supported by the government submission, which is, I think, a shame. And I think it is, exactly as Yanni said, a missed opportunity.
So we're happy to strengthen that section around the homes,
Yeah.
in terms of both the Resource Management Act and the Building Act and
Yep.
that framework.
Yep, and I also,
and we're happy to add something about the land use planning, the
yeah,
importance of the land use
just a
planning.
link to it, because it does mean that there's more energy use if people have to travel in order to get to places. You know, which is why we've focused our activities around the key activity centres. But the one that I just want to add, and I'll come to you, Vicky, is in that public sector role. I think that, again, a missed opportunity was the DHB being part of the heat exchange, the local energy scheme, or district energy scheme. And that was a decision that was made in Wellington, wasn't a decision that was supported locally by the Canterbury DHB, and it's again a huge missed opportunity, and we've got that coal burning facility right, and they use Burwood Hospital being powered entirely by wood waste residues as the good example. And they completely ignore the fact that they had an opportunity to decommission a coal burning facility right in the heart of the city. Yeah. So that was just saying. Vicky.
I think there's a couple of ways that we could do this, and I think it's quite hard to write a submission with all these inputs. Either we could do it here, or we could do it like we did the oil one and just have a small group and just rehash it.
I would love that. So I've got a list of 8. I've got a list of 8 items that we need to strengthen, and I'd be happy to work with a couple of councillors.
Because it's, I mean, the energy strategy that it's based on is, I'm assuming, the 2011 one before the signing of the Paris thing, which actually includes the words, the government wants New Zealand to be a highly attractive global destination for petroleum exploration, etc., and how coal is really important and crude oil and all those sorts of things. And yet we have a Paris Agreement which requires us to cut our emissions by 30% by 2030, and this covers 5 of those years. So, and I mean, even government fleets of vehicles are still not electric. There's no real incentives here for people to change their car from a fossil fuel car to an EV through way of interest-free loans. The targets are incredibly soft, and I just think in the way that we did with the oil submission, a group of stroppy people sitting around the table just telling it really how it is probably the easiest way of doing it and saves
So
a huge
what's the
amount.
deadline for the...
7th of February. So that group of stroppy people will need to be nimble.
Okay, so we're going to appoint councillors, but actually we're going to delegate to them.
Yeah.
So can I have names, please? So delegate them to delegate the approval of the submission to the following group of councillors.
It was the woman this time.
So can I have delegate amendment and final approval?
Yes. And that's going to be Pauline, Phil and Vicky.
I didn't get my hand up.
We haven't established we're signing off on the terms of reference next week. So and Sarah. So do you want to be on it?
Yeah.
Glenn. All right.
He likes stroppy.
And Glenn. So
That's 5. Could we have a quorum?
yeah, 3. Oh,
Because we've got
2.
Sarah.
You've got a quorum of 2.
Yeah, that's cool.
Thank you.
Final approval of the submission to Vicky Buck. Don't put it to work with staff. Just say final approval of the submission. Take out those words. Yep. To councillors Buck, Cotter, Clearwater, Templeton and Livingston.
And just for councillors' benefit, I'm going to suggest that Kevin and Nick have a go at the list of things that we've heard tomorrow. And on Tuesday morning, we'll need to meet and get it signed off so we can send it off on Tuesday afternoon. Does that fit?
One more. The public transport, we've talked about encouraging the use of public transport in the fleet, etc., but we haven't really focused on electrification of public transport, so that might be something to include.
Can we delegate it to a meeting of, with a quorum of 2?
Thanks, Pauline.
So I'm changing that to a meeting of councillors, etc., with a quorum of 2.
Thank you.
All right. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried.
Mover and second.
Oh, sorry. Pauline and Sarah moved and seconded. I'll put it again. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Right. And finally, can we have staff back at the table now just to answer the question in relation to item 9.